Good morning.
I'll edit whatever. You start over. I'll edit.
Welcome to In Pursuit with Cold Case Clay Bryant. Myself, Miss Tony Striblin, owner of Rogers Barbecue, our sponsor. Here today, we're going to talk about another old case, and this was a case of Fred Wilkerson. Fred Wilkerson disappeared in 1987, and he was pretty much without a trace for a long period of time. We were able to rebuild the case, and just through some strange circumstances, the case got our way, and it's an interesting story, and I hope you folks enjoy it. In 2002, I had gone to work for the district attorney's office, Pete Scandalakis, and we'd had a little luck on the case, and we had a situation where we had a big storm come through, and a large pine tree fell across Pete's new Dodge pickup truck. Well, he asked me where I thought would be the best place to take it, and I said West Georgia Paint and Body. That was to Tim Wilkerson's place. He had a reputation for doing excellent work and good people. Well, so we got what was left of the truck and got it over to Tim Wilkerson's place, and during the course of the bartering back and forth about them doing the work on the truck or totaling it up, which I think is what ended up happening, Tim congratulated us on some success on an old cold case. And he just said, you know, I wish y'all could look at my dad's case. And I looked at Pete, and Pete looked at me, and I said, I'm in for that. And Pete said, sure. So through an act of God, we got another case that came our way. There were several things that in the case that were always an absolute mystery. Fred pretty much, he disappeared on Thanksgiving evening of 1987. And that was the last time anybody saw or heard of Fred Wilkerson. He was a truck driver for fast food merchandisers at the time out in the industrial park. And he was supposed to leave the next morning at roughly 5 o'clock. And this was after he'd spent Thanksgiving at his family, and they had their meal together and whatnot, and said the goodbyes. But Tim was supposed to meet him the next morning. They were actually living together in an apartment in LaGrange. And when Tim got home that night, his dad wasn't there. Well, he thought maybe he was somewhere else, and he'd show back up. 5 o'clock the next morning rolled around, and there was no Fred. As it got later, which was totally out of character for him, he was not the kind of person just to not show up. He worked every day, had a tremendous work ethic. He was close to his family. There had been some, I guess you'd say, marital disharmony in the last little bit. He had run into a woman at his workplace, and they had developed a relationship, and it caused he and his wife to get a divorce. And this woman was a, I guess I'd describe her as a black widow. She knew exactly what she wanted and was pretty well willing to do anything in the world that she needed to do to get it. She had been raised in abject poverty up in Fairmont, West Virginia. Her daddy was a coal miner, and she was raised in a house that didn't even have running plumbing. And I guess that's probably part of the reason that she became so obsessed with things. She was a very materialistic person. She had, while she was up in Fairmont, West Virginia, she had married a guy named Gary Quedens, who was a engineering student at University of West Virginia, and they moved to LaGrange. And she befriended Fred, through his work. He was, at the time, he was working for Gusto Brands in LaGrange, and he worked there with her, and it was one of those situations where she always had some type of emergency or drama going on, and Fred was going to make it his business. Fred was a rescue guy. He was the chief of the volunteer fire department at Ware's Crossroad, and he was one of those folks that give you the shirt off his back, and he was actually a tailor-made victim for somebody like Connie King Quedens. One thing led to another. Fred and his wife got divorced, and Connie got talked Fred into building a house together, and that was their plan, was they were going to have this life together, and that was going to be their marital residence. And Fred started off by buying the land that the house was on, and at some point Fred deeded the land to her. She told him that because of her impending divorce, that it would be better for her with her custodial situation with children if the place was in her name. Fred signed, I think it was 23 acres over to her for love and affection. And that turned out to be a very, very bad business decision and a fatal mistake.
Was it in Troup County?
It was 423 Ware's Crossroad was where the property was located. Mm-hmm. And Fred set about putting every nickel he ever had into this marital residence for he and Connie. Well, he got the place built, and at the very end of the deal, Connie decides she wants a swimming pool. So Fred's tapped out as far as money goes. He's done borrowed every nickel that he can. So he goes to a friend of his, and he gets him to borrow the money for him to bank. Well, as quick as Fred gets the swimming pool done and this and that, and everything is put in Connie's name. Well, actually, she goes at that point, because they had gotten a loan to build the house with her in it, in the loan. Well, she had been dismissed from her job over at Gusto Brands, and she went to work at the not the Toyota place, but at Mike Patton and the Honda place. And somehow or another, she got the guy that owned the Honda place to underwrite her a loan, and she bought Fred's part of everything out, unbeknown to Fred, through some manner of chicanery, and I'm not exactly sure how that came about. But anyway, so she immediately puts Fred out of the house and moves the ex-husband back in the house. Well, Fred's friend, because Fred at that point, he's tapped out, doesn't have any money, but he's still on the hook for a few $1,000s for the swimming pool. His buddy tells him, says, you know, you can either go to my lawyer and let's see if we can't recoup this money for what she's done to you, or mine, your friendship's over. Well, he went to a local lawyer, H.J. Thomas. They filed a suit, and that suit served her on Tuesday, I believe it was, or possibly Monday of the week of Thanksgiving of 1987. Well, at some point in time, she contacts Fred about trying to settle up about the suit. When Fred leaves his family Thanksgiving dinner, unbeknown to everybody else, he goes over to talk with Connie. Well, nobody knows where he went, and the next thing we know, he doesn't show up the next morning, and there we go. Next thing anybody sees of Fred Wilkerson is in just before Christmas. his car is found in long-term parking at the Atlanta airport, which was ironic. And in the car there was paychecks, uncashed paychecks and things that, the general consensus was, well, Fred, because of all the other things that gone, he just wanted to go start a new life, which, that's one theory. I didn't prescribe to that. But Fred was just gone, which was like, again, totally uncharacteristic of him. His son went looking for him immediately that morning. He never showed up. His truck was sitting there loaded, ready to go. So the family immediately went to thinking, the worst, what in the world could happen. For the next 17 years, they put out flyers and advertised trying to find what could have happened to Fred. Well, we got into the deal, and when Pete and I started looking at the case, there were just several red flags that I thought were things that should have been looked into. And there was a young lady that she had actually come forward. If you fast forward 7 years, Connie Quedens had an insurance policy on Fred's life. Connie, in order to collect the policy, she had to have him declared dead. Well, if you have a vested interest in someone's estate, then you can apply after 7 years of no contact to have the person declared deceased. Connie paid a little insurance every 6 months. She paid a insurance premium on Fred's life, just like putting money in the bank. And she did that for 7 years. And then she applied with the probate court to have him declared dead. And she collected that policy. Well, when the hearing to have him declared dead came about, of course, the Wilkerson family, they contested it, didn't want anything to do with having Fred declared dead. And it became news again. There had always been a lot of speculation of that maybe because of the financial situation between Fred and Connie and this and that she may have had something to do with his disappearance. Well, during the time that this hearing went on, there were several things that came out. And one thing that came out that was made public, again, was the fact where the car was found. Well, there was a young lady that had been friends with Connie and her children and Fred's children. When she saw that the car was left at the Atlanta airport, she contacted the attorney for the Wilkersons, and there she told him, she said, "Oh my God, on the weekend of Thanksgiving, the year that Fred disappeared," she said, "I drove to the airport to pick her up." She had called and gave a story about she had some folks down from West Virginia, and that she had they had too much to drink, and they had a rental car, and she was going to drive the rental car and them to Atlanta that Friday after the Thanksgiving. And so the young lady, she contacts the attorney, who in turn contacted the sheriff's office, and I don't know exactly why or how that went, but it never nobody ever talked to the young lady. Well, when Tim was telling me about everything, he mentioned that to me. And he said that to his knowledge, nobody had talked to the girl. Well, she at that point was in Goose Creek, South Carolina, and she moved up there and moved away from here and got, I think she was married then. And he told me who she was. I contacted the lady, and she told me about it. Well, the next morning I was in Goose Creek, South Carolina. And she gave a statement as to things, and there were some other things that were related to it that made me even more suspicious about what may have happened to Fred. We came back, developed everything that we could, and there was a well on the place, probably within 60, 70 yards from the back door of the house that Fred built. It was in a field up there, and it had long since been covered. And I did a little research and found out through the young lady, her name was Holdeman, and she said that, you know, they were in school together, and that after Fred had disappeared, that the woman had actually, Connie Quedens, had actually gotten some of the kids, and they were taking brush and debris and whatnot, throwing it in that well, and she tried to set it on fire. Well, down there, you know, in the bottom of a well, oxygen burns up just boom, super quick, and there's no fire. So over a period of time, the well gets pretty close to being full, and then Connie had placed herself into another situation in somebody else's business, and a guy that was doing landscaping, and she got him to fill in the rest of the well with a machine. During the investigation itself and all the things that were going on at the time, I was able to get a search warrant for the house, and and the curtilage of property around it, and we were able to. I'd contacted the guy that filled the well in, and he showed me exactly where it was in an open field. You couldn't see anything of it, but we knew where it was. And from what Miss Haldeman and Mr. Patterson, who was a gentleman that filled the well in, told me, I felt relatively sure that we had no probable cause to be able to get a search warrant, which we did. And we were able to get together a plan, and we excavated the well. I'd contacted the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the Criminal Anthropology section, and Dr. Frederick Snow. He came down and formulated up what he said we needed to do in order to take care of this. Well, it's going to be a fairly large undertaking. We're talking about moving half of a mountain of dirt, you know, because you had to keep it dug away from where the well was, where it'd be safe to excavate it, because we didn't know how deep it was going to have to go. And anytime you start moving that kind, you can't leave it up in the air to collapse on someone. So, but we were very fortunate. Fred Wilkerson had some friends. He was always known to be a good guy, give you a shirt off his back. And his good friend, Mr. Raymond Vaughn, I knew he had an interest in whatever had happened with Fred. And I had gone to Raymond and I said, you know, we're going to have to do this excavation. And Raymond had a lot of equipment and the ability to take care of stuff like that. Just as a matter of his friendship, he, and wanting to do right by Fred's family, he volunteers to bring the equipment and do the things that we needed to be done, which were going to be substantially expensive to do. And he brought a big excavator and a big track loader, and we got the plan up, and we were going to do exactly by the numbers that Dr. Snow was there, and he was directing the thing. Well, that day, in the meanwhile, Connie had lived again with her husband. Well, now she was getting a divorce again from him. And we were able to find out from him there was a situation where the day that Fred disappeared, Connie was supposed to accompany her husband and their son to Florida to visit an uncle of the husband. Well, at the last minute, she told her husband she had to work, she couldn't go, but she wanted them to go anyway. And when he got home, there was everything seemed to be in order. But when he went downstairs, there's a pistol in the floor. Sometimes you have to make deals with the devil to get the witch. And that was one of those situations. In talking to him, we were absolutely sure that he did not take part in Fred's demise. When Fred disappeared, we actually could place him. He was having some dealings with a car dealership in Tampa, Florida. And we were able to establish the fact beyond a certain moral certainty that he was in Florida at the time this took place. Well, when we did the search of her house, we came across this information. She had a couple of tapes in the house. And one of them was a tape of her when she was speaking to Fred Wilkerson when she found out she was being sued the first part of that week. And in that tape, she says, "Fred Wilkerson, you son of a bitch, I'll kill you." And it sounded to me like she probably made good on that threat. Well, there was also another tape. Her and her on-again, off-again husband, Gary, he makes a statement. She's recording him because she's trying to get as much out of him out of a divorce settlement as she can. And she says, "I want to know where is my Walther on this tape." And the only thing I could figure, in the Fred tape especially, is she kept it like it's a trophy. Mm-hmm. But she had that tape there for 17 years and had it there in the house. All right, well, this other tape between her and Gary says this. She says, "I want my Walther pistol." And the tape says, "Connie, there were only 3 Walther pistols. The 2 that had consecutive serial numbers that I bought for the boys from Marcus Smith. And then there was the one that someone may have used at Fred's time." Well, that brought us to the point where then we talked to him. And he told us about finding the pistol in the floor and this and that. And we were able to verify his movements and things. And it carried us right on down the road. Well, the day that we found Fred, it was, like I said again, we moved a mountain of dirt. Mr. Vaughn did. And Dr. Snow, the way we did it was we dug down beside the well. And as we dug down, we had to push all that dirt down off the side of the hill. And Dr. Snow would excavate the well by hand as he stood on the ground as we were digging beside it for safety. And about 20 feet down, there's a roll of carpet. And in that carpet, there's the skeletal remains of Fred Wilkerson. And it was one of the more bizarre things I'd ever run across in my life. We were able to recover Fred's remains. He was wrapped in carpet, and where he had been it appeared he was still clothed, and he had his chapstick in his pocket, which was something that he always had, and he had his keys in his pocket that Tim was able to identify. And we were able to put together a case that was a very compelling case that, just for greed and what not reasons and love of materialistic things, Connie Quedens killed Fred Wilkerson and executed him, and actually enticed him to come over to talk about some type of arrangement that could be made. And when we were interviewing her while we were doing the search of the property in the house, Connie came up with this bizarre story about there was a police car that drove up in the yard the night that Fred disappeared, and that it had a policeman, you know who it was, and a nurse in there, and they were arguing about Fred, and Fred got in the car and left with them, and she got a call that said that if she didn't take that car, Fred's car, to the airport, then something would happen to her children, and just the most bizarre story you ever heard. It was a made-up fly-by-the-seat of your pants through necessity story, and like most of those, it kind of fell right apart for her. But we got her charged, and of course she was held without bond. Pete tried the case himself, and it was a masterful case. The prosecution was, and I never will forget Fred's wife, Miss Connie. She had been stricken ill, and she was had terminal cancer, and she knew that. She called me one day prior to the trial and wanted me to stop by her house, and I did. Her and her husband, she had remarried. They were there, and she was low sick, and she said, you know, Clay, she said, I appreciate everything you've tried to do to help us find some justice for my children. And she asked me, said, do you think that you'll be able to convict her? And it's one of the things, and I've used this statement before, and it's the truth. I told Miss Connie, I said, Connie, it will take a jury longer to elect a foreman than it will to convict her. And that was the truth. We had in less than a couple of hours, we got a verdict back on felony murder and malice murder. Connie's currently serving life in prison for the murder of Fred Wilkerson, as well she should have. Mm-hmm. And but it was one of those situations where a really decent person was preyed on, and and there are other things that I found out about Miss Quedens before she came down here. She worked in a city hall in Fairmont, West Virginia, and she'd been prosecuted up there for some theft. Oh my gosh. And she'd actually, in talking to a detective up there, there was she was going to a community college there, and she was taking some courses, and there was a professor there that bless his heart, he disappeared, and the detective was telling me about it, and I just seen some parallels in the cases, and of course this one would probably never go anywhere, and I no way to prove it either, but this guy was never found. But his car was at the Richmond airport. And there was talk that Connie and him may have had some type of relationship. Whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent, that's just what I was told. But there's a heck of a coincidence.
It is.
And,
well, tell them about your book.
Well, the book is the cold case murder of Fred Wilkerson, Untangling the Black Widow's Web in West Georgia. And it's a step-by-step story of the murder and the solving of the case of Fred Wilkerson. Like any other book that I write, there's not a lot of fluff in it. We just talk about the case and how it went, and the luck and things that were involved in solving the case and trying to find some justice for a family that deserved it for a long, long time. You know, when you start talking about the callousness of watching folks that she knew for 17 years, these folks struggle with the unknown of what happened to their father. And she sits there and doesn't say a word. She writes checks every 6 months for a life insurance policy, just like putting money in the bank on a dead man.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's how callous and cold can you be?
And she was in this community. She stayed in the community. She socialized in the community.
Oh yeah, I never will forget the day that we pulled up with, I mean, it looked like, you know, we got 2 low-bore trucks sitting out in front, a GBI crime thing, TV cameras, it's a whole, you know, it was going to be a big deal. And we pull up there, and she done moved her another boyfriend in the house, and knocked on the door and asked where Connie was. And he told me rather quickly, Miss Connie will be back in just a little while. She's in town doing her Christian charity work.
Oh my gracious.
And I'll never forget, as quick as from down at the well, the digging scene with myself and Captain Grizzard with the sheriff's office, we were interviewing Connie. And as quick as they called up and said, we have found human remains, then this big long story about all this other stuff starts, and it's but it's all in the book, and I think we've probably covered it about as well as you could, and it tells the names of the folks and exactly what everybody contributed, and if you like true crime, give it a read. I think you'll enjoy it. We got this one, and we got another case that was behind this, and since I've retired from my state job, Sheriff Woodruff's good enough to give me the opportunity to step back into a role where we're looking at some cold cases in Troup County, and we're having some luck with some, and we're going to see what we can do. And again, I've been very fortunate in my life to be able to work with some good folks that want to uncover the truth about some folks that would do justice from a long time ago and tried it. Can't say enough for folks like Pete Scandalakis and Sheriff Woodruff. And if everything goes well, we're going to have a little more to write about. But again, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate your interest in these things, and I'd appreciate it if you'd like and share this on YouTube, and I'd like to absolutely be able to try to drum up some business for Rogers Barbecue in Hope, Georgia. They are good enough to sponsor this and set this thing up, and I appreciate that more than I could say. And Miss Stoney, thank you so much.
Yeah.
But that's our story for today, and we'll be back with another one pretty soon.
We'll let y'all know that you can ask questions and you can tell your story. We have now had people reaching out and wanting to ask about certain cases that Clay might be privy to, and we have people telling us their story about someone they have lost. It's taken turns that I think Clay probably expected, and it is surprising to me how many people have lost loved ones and they have not been found. So please reach out to us. We'd like to hear your story. We'd like to know more about it. If it's compelling enough, we'll look into it and maybe have you on this podcast to talk about what happened. So like you said, like, share, and subscribe, and we're going to keep bringing more stories to you. He has got another book he's going to tell you about later, and he's writing another one right now. And so this is getting very interesting, and we appreciate all y'all watching.
Again, thank you, and I hope you have a pleasant day.
Yes, thank you.
What do you think?
It was great. great.
Hey, Pup.
And you know